but it's actually a meme that changes and encodes new beliefs around a certain piece of technology, and I think that that's like incredibly powerful.
And yeah, but can we just start riffing on that?
Well, I actually worked in VC before that's how I got into crypto.
I remember when we met, right?
And it's interesting. I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with VC. On one hand, I see what you're saying, right? Which is like needing to take on this role of futurist as a means of identifying and sourcing and diving super deep into like the domains that will become a big thing, aka will return investments. You kind of do have to be a little bit of like a soothsayer, like a future seer in VC, but it's interesting because VC's opinions on crypto and what will win. When I was there, I was at an early stage startup in like 2017 during the white paper craze. You know, Consensus was there. We're mining crypto kitties, minting crypto kitties while they're there, right? The conclusions that VCs came to in that middle, what was defining where they put their money, are sometimes the complete opposite, I think, of what actually happened in practice. And I think that when you're kind of driven by what's going to be the biggest return, what's going to be the biggest market, sure, there's a formula to that, and it makes a lot of sense. But I actually think that it limits the future seeing, and it makes it scoped. And so you kind of have this more tunnel vision that you miss out on kind of like, I think, things that then organically emerge and then actually are the things that define the space. For example, with NFTs, a really good example.
Unstructure your thought process.
Yes, exactly, like you said. And so I feel like in VC, you kind of have to have a structured thought process, and that has limited our ability to kind of look at technology maybe more unstructured, more organically, and kind of see what can emerge from it, and then trying to steward that process instead of just kind of putting everything into a formula. So, but I also like understand it, so it's kind of like a love-hate relationship. I mean, I'm also like a huge fantasy nerd, and I think like most of like my belief system is kind of like based in a lot of fantasy that I've read and used to kind of like define the way that I look at the world. I'm a huge Dungeons and Dragons fan, for example, right? And when I'm able to kind of contextualize more complex topics in relation to things that I have such kind of like a personal connection to, I guess it like with Kia, right? Inventories as a way to describe Gnosis Safe as, which is sure just like a meme, but it's actually a meme that changes and encodes new beliefs around a certain piece of technology, and I think that that's like incredibly powerful. It's kind of using these memes to define a new lore that helps us craft a new ideological perspective on technology. And so like all of crypto is just basically all of these different lores that people are just like embedding memes into and kind of progressively moving forward. And so for me, my memes come from the culture that I like to consume, which is like fantasy. And with chaos magic, I actually think it's really interesting. I actually looked up the definition of chaos. It's like the official definition of it the first time because I had been saying it. It's like chaos magic because I really believe that people in crypto like really view crypto as chaotic good, as a means of destroying the systems, but restructuring ones that are better instead of trying to fix the current system. And then I looked up chaos magic, and wow, chaos magic is like literally that embodied. It's just the magic that allows you to challenge the arbitrary symbol systems that kind of govern the natural world and allow you to break them and then encode new beliefs in new systems. And it was wild when I saw that. That's what we believe, and we use that belief to challenge the systems and the norms that lie around us, and then we use those challenges to inform solutions to new worlds, new utopias, new realms that we kind of want to see. So I think that the memes are like incredibly important, and for me, my memes are definitely kind of written in this already like ulterior world, which is like fantasy, right? In which people are already kind of challenging that, and through magic systems and crafting systems, kind of like embodying different beliefs.
How do you design your version of success?
I mean, being a New Yorker, being an American, my definition of success is actually something that's tangential or in parallel. It's a separate track than I think what we're saying, which is like how do you define personal success in passion, in beliefs, and what you belong and what you opt into. My image of success is a construct that's been built in the environment around me of what I should do to succeed and what I need to do. And that kind of one track, degree, university, job, promote, retire, that kind of whole thing. I think it's shifting every day, but I would say that like what is success is something that's like still very defined by kind of this societal construct that's built around me. However, how I challenge that is through, I kind of see what you're saying now, how I embed my personal beliefs and values in the work that I'm doing. And I think that venturing into crypto has allowed me to actually explore what those are. What world do I actually envision? What world do I actually want to bring about? What world can I steward? And why do I believe that? And I think that this comes into the cultural aspect of your life, is like what are the cultural factors that influence the way you think and the way you are. Fantasy, for example, right? They kind of instill that creativity that I guess allows you to challenge the traditional worldview and kind of envision what you want for it. So I would say that for me, it's like a huge personal personal journey, and I now find success in my ability to understand, digest, and then communicate those opinions to people around me, but only because I think I've been given a forum in my work and my traditional path in which that is valued, accepted, and actually helps me influence, make more impact in kind of my professional track.
And that kind of just goes back to like lore and narratives, and I love that so many people in the space are now talking a lot more about lore and how important it is. Because everything in society is structured right now, a huge continuance of it. So it's really cool to see how deep and raw what we're doing is at the end of the day. Like we're literally rebuilding and restructuring society, or at least trying to.
Intuition, gut instinct for the last 15, 12 years and has guided my work and brought me here. And you met me at day one.
I have a picture of you at Web3 Summit doing your DAO design workshop.
You were very reassuring at the time. And none of us ever thought that all of this would have happened the way it happened. But what I feel is that the hyper object of the success narrative, which is something you can't really touch but you can sense, is the most powerful selling point. Organizer of choices of agents in non-communication. And by storytelling away a different or a shifted ideal of what it is to be an admirable living being, what aspects of your action in the world influence the visions of other people's of what success looks like. That is, for me, the most violent form of power that there is. And of course, you cannot do that without Cold Hard Cash. Cold Hard Cash is part of the game. I feel that one of the missions of the Taoist as a bassist, or doing delicate listening work in a space where all is sound and fury and there's no space for listening, is to kind of suss out these shifts. Hopefully in 5 years we'll still be friends and we can actually have this conversation again and see what happens.
Yeah.
But then what's happening that's funny with the three people on this table particularly is that we completely different strategies and completely different backgrounds. When you say like, as a New Yorker that went to a Eastern country, fuck all to me. I have no idea what all that means because I'm not American.
It's basically raised in a neoliberal, hyper-consumerist.
For example, I'm Brazilian, so definitely neoliberal, hyper-consumerist, and capitalistic. It's just that the signifiers are different. And as we're aspiring for a ever more global community, and we're talking about diversity all the time, we have to always remember that the heuristics only work for others, and that people like, correct, could be in person, but maybe because the Bahamas are so close, maybe you don't feel it as much.
It's definitely an in-between.
Yeah, like the amount of knowledge I have of American society and politics for a Brazilian is insane. Like it doesn't exist. And I still feel friction all the time in terms of adapting, like neuroplastically to the stuff. A month and a half before coming to Denver, I felt like tension and anxiety building in my body because I don't want to be in American soil. But that's another different.
Understandable.
I think I would say that it's actually interesting as being someone who moved from America and is now based in Europe, how much that move also helps support changes in my worldview, which then impact my personal version of success and my professional version of success. And I think that changing geographies very much so influences the way that you kind of frame your life in terms of success and happiness.
I think one of the interesting things in terms of geography and cultures is like our relationship with hierarchy in all its various forms, because we all have different types of governance, kind of sort of democratic republic structure, but they all look very different from each other. Like U.S. politics looks different from our politics, which looks different from your politics. And it's like how we see governance. When we converge it, that's when it becomes like kind of chaotic, but it could be either in a bad way or in a good way. And I think what we're doing is making it more in a good way.
That difference, which I think is incredibly important, will then actually find its way into the organizations that we build and that we are a part of, or in the way that those organizations relate to the jurisdictions that they're in. I think MakerDAO is like a really interesting example. As MakerDAO, one could say, well, it's not like a US-based organization or whatever, has developed in a way in that it has to be able to interact and kind of be recognized within the New York Wall Street space. Like that's where the Maker office was in Wall Street, right? And when you think about those cultural values that a decentralized organization is forming within, you actually realize that it's not just resilient to the cultural influences outside of it. It actually will absorb some of that, right? And kind of embed it in its culture. So I'm also interested to see how geographies actually impact like the DAOs that are created, kind of what differences we'll see in regulation around DAOs and acceptance of DAOs. I think it will be really interesting.
That's what I'm most excited about, actually.
Yeah?
Like what do DAOs in the global south look like? What do DAOs from underserved communities in general look like? I think they'll look massively different from what we are already used to and see. And that's going to be, again, like a selling point of all these different convergences coming together.
And how can we make sure that we're providing more like intersectional research into the differences between cultures? What? Nice. Well, there you go.
There you go.
It's just being able to explore that and understand the differences, and also understand what aspects I think of like decentralized technologies can more uniquely benefit different cultures.
But one thing I don't understand completely the total trajectory from OS Coin to Radicle, etc. But I do feel that this organization has been doing this type of work, which is, although it's a very skeletal organization, which means creating technical infrastructure. I created this metaphor. I should put this in a proper talk so it catches on. The metaphor is skeletal, tech, muscle, capital, power, and might to push reality, like to make it happen. Radicle has actually been particularly attentive to also being connective tissue. So what I was going to say is that organizations like the Taoist are pure connective tissue. It's a desire to maintain itself underfunded, always has to be crafty and innovative in finding the path of least resistance, which is like, what is the pregnant empty space that I can flow towards instead of getting myself on a race with somebody who probably has more money, has more whatever. What is the unseen that we can see, that we are forced to see because the obvious option is unavailable?
Yeah, and I think that, that what you just said is like literally perfectly embodied in the free and open source phenomenon, current state, right? And I think that this is kind of where the original Radicle vision lay in the OS Coin vision. If you read the OS Coin manifesto, it's all about, the proliferation of the open source sustainability issue. It's kind of what my talk was on yesterday as well, which is like co-option, is that a word? Like private corporations co-opting FOSS values to create better software, also acquire the profits that were generated through one of the first, to say, officially recognized forms of commons-based peer production. That journey to where we are now, which I also think is a huge influence on the problems that all of Web3 is trying to solve, right? Which is like co-option of free and open source software because decentralized collaboration builds better software, and if you're able to co-opt the building of better software and then acquire and build a profit model on top of it, then like why wouldn't you, right? And so I think that was the problem that the OS Coin manifesto specifically and kind of original vision started, which is like, how can you introduce new value networks that create more regenerative value within, so you don't have to rely on the externalities that negatively impact you from outside. So instead of taking in capital and putting it out and then returning, it's how can we take in capital and regenerate it and then put it out more intentionally, instead of like kind of having to have this more linear, one-dimensional capital flow. That vision translated into Radicle, because I think what we realize is that if we are to build financially sustainable open source ecosystem, we have to have technically resilient code collaboration infrastructure. There is no one without the other. Like they're like actually like very, very, very closely intertwined. Then we looked at Web3 and we're like, actually like Web3, we don't think that Web3 can do what Web3 wants to do without both of these in place. We think that they're primitives, collaboration, financial collaboration, that are inherently necessary for the decentralized technology space to adopt and experiment with, because we need technical, financial, and political resilience to truly build and implement decentralized organizations and systems at scale.
Add to the resiliences, that's what I've been focusing my work on. I am very worried about the lack of narrative resilience, especially in the sense of what's the most important aspects of the work. In DAOs and in Web3 things, I see a very big attack vector in capture of the narrative by things that behave similarly but without the actual point. We have all of these companies that are now DAOs, but they're not actual DAOs. We have all of these L1s that are decentralized, but they are not decentralized. By creating herd immunity, herd knowledge immunity to this value capture, don't look at this specific problem. We might become a coterie of enlightened OGs surrounded by a sea of exploited hopium inhaler. Maybe we want that, but I don't think we want. I want to make you aware that timer went off.
I know, and I have to go. I wish I could stay for longer because this is really great. But